The last hope to see Metroid Prime 2 and 3 re-released is upon us, as you probably realize that next month we are staring at the release of Metroid Prime 4 on December 4th, and today on October 28th, when you are seeing this video go live, is actually the release date of the Metroid Prime 1 through 3 visual retrospective book that does heavily talk about Prime 2 and 3, their development, and some specific comments that were cited from VGC, maybe giving us just a glimmer of hope that at least the series producer wants to see Prime 2 re-released, as he says as much in this book, and could even be alluding to the fact that he knows it's a thing. That said, this is not confirmed. There are also some additional rumors out there from sources like Nashweedle that we have covered in different videos prior to this. I'll have it linked in the description down below if you want to go watch that entirely. But Nash is claiming that he has heard that every Metroid Prime game will be making its way to Nintendo Switch, even citing games like Prime Hunters and Prime Pinball, which would definitely be an interesting one to see come to fruition. And due to the time and the nature of this supposed leak, you would assume they would release as some kind of collection pack, and it wouldn't just be something that is slowly going to be added to Nintendo Switch Online over time, which is alternatively how we could also see these games released. But I want to start off by hopping over to VGC and actually reading through the article with you all and discussing what was shared with the series producer, and then kind of dive into when, if at all, would we be able to see any kind of re-release of Metroid Prime 2 and 3 in the lead up to Prime 4's December 4th release date, and actually make it make sense. So there's one last hope that we have, but I'm not holding on to it with all my hopes, dreams, and expectations at this point in time. I will tell you that much so far. But make sure you like, subscribe, and turn on your bell notification to join Sunbro Nation if you're new here. And you can see over at VGC the following article, which outlines Nintendo's Metroid Prime 2 producer wants more players to experience multiplayer mode. Kensuke Tanabe alludes to a potential Metroid Prime 2 re-release in the new art book. And you have here, although there's been no official announcement, Switch remasters of the second and third GameCube entries in the Metroid Prime trilogy have been expected ever since Nintendo shadow dropped Metroid Prime Remastered in 2023, especially with Prime 4 on the horizon. In a new art book, Metroid Prime 1 through 3, a visual retrospective, Tanabe alludes to the possibility of a Metroid Prime 2 re-release in a section commenting on the game's local multiplayer mode. Retro finished the multiplayer mode without compromising on quality, even under such challenging conditions, he wrote. Being of its time, it was designed for local play, so the number of players who actually experienced it might not have been very large. If it is remade, I'd be delighted for more people to have the chance to experience it. In the book, Tanabe also reveals that a full Metroid Prime multiplayer game was initially pitched as the follow-up to the original Prime, partly due to the quick turnaround mandate for a sequel. After finishing Metroid Prime, Nintendo directed Retro Studios to complete the next project in as short as time as possible, he wrote. Initially, there was a proposal to develop a multiplayer-focused Metroid Prime 1.5, and ultimately, multiplayer was realized in Metroid Prime 2. However, Retro expressed a desire to create a robust standalone sequel in Metroid Prime 2. Tanabe explains that the development of Metroid Prime 2 took place under circumstances where schedule extensions were not permitted, so in the game's final 3 to 4 months of development, it had to make decisions at an incredible pace. On some days, Nintendo would have multiple translators read different sections of Retro's English design materials at once so that it could understand them as quickly as possible and make decisions, he said. Metroid Prime 1 through 3, a visual retrospective, is available to purchase from Tuesday, October 28th. So the big quote in question there is obviously that Tanabe wants to see the multiplayer realized at a much broader scale than it ever was before, by a lot more players than ever were available to experience it before, because nowadays, if you had something like multiplayer in a Metroid game, it could be experienced online by a vast majority of people that when you were playing local multiplayer and it was tacked on to Metroid Prime 2 as an additional mode, it was not something that was experienced by a lot of players. But I don't think that this comment necessarily gives us any kind of confirmed insight that a re-release of Metroid Prime 2 is happening, but you just look at the environment of what's going on. We're in the lead up to Metroid Prime 4's marketing cycle. Unfortunately, in my opinion, Nintendo has not been doing a good job marketing Metroid Prime 4 at all. We literally have had essentially radio silence since the last trailer revealing the Viola bike, and we also had a Nintendo Dream magazine go live recently with new updates around Metroid Prime 4. But as the clock ticks closer to this game's release date, we need to see a lot more coverage and Nintendo talking about Metroid Prime 4 a lot more. And I am in the mindset that there is a 50-50 shot that we get a dedicated Metroid Prime 4 focused direct, and that would likely happen roughly about a month before the game releases. We do know of some amiibo dates, such as Samus and Samus with Viola releasing on November 6th, and that is literally about a month before Metroid Prime 4 ultimately drops. And there is some talk online, that's a Thursday, November 6th, that maybe in that week, granted this is Hyrule Warriors Age of Imprisonment release day, and Nintendo might not want to market another game while that game is literally in its launch week, although they've done Stranger Things before, so it's not off the table, but that could be a week that makes sense. If not, the week past it, I think would be the last time that you'd probably do it in the lead up to the marketing push. It could be later in November, but you know, if these games are real and they're going to drop them at all in the lead up to Prime 4, it would have to be at a dedicated deep dive Metroid Prime 4 focused direct. And at this point, you're barely even giving players enough time to go through those games and complete them in the lead up to Prime 4. Like, with the kind of free time schedule I have, I would have a very hard time actually making it through 2 and 3 successfully in the lead up to Prime 4, but it is a possibility. We have the outstanding rumor from Nash Weedle, but we also have, you know, these games, the reason they've been talked about for so long is, you know, we had sources like Jeff Grubb and Nate the Hate that both had inside information on Metroid Prime 1 Remastered, suggesting that Prime 2 and 3 would be coming at some point. Now, to be fair, Nate has since clarified that he only expects these games to really release on NSO if they're coming at all, and that is another real reality that we could unfortunately be looking at for Prime 2 and 3, because obviously we're already in the GameCube generation for NSO, and it's very possible that Nintendo wants to hold that back, and really that's how we're going to be able to experience the multiplayer online, is by adding it to NSO. It has multiplayer baked in, and then that's a big reason that you pay the NSO subscription so you can play Metroid Prime 2 online. This is a reality of how they could add in the games. We would then ultimately, at some point, we're going to get Wii added into the NSO service, and that's, you know, obviously how Prime 3 Corruption could come over. That said, Nintendo has done things like simple HD ports, because I don't think that these are going to be from the ground up remasters like Prime 1 Remastered was at this point in time, but you saw Pikmin 1 and 2 HD Shadow Drop release at a Nintendo Direct presentation in the lead up to the marketing for Pikmin 4, so that way you could play all the games in the franchise, and especially whenever they are numbered releases. Like, a lot of today's gamers did not play Metroid Prime 1, 2, or 3, and obviously you have an easy way to go play Prime 1 if you want to with the remastered edition on Nintendo Switch for $40, but you talk about Prime 2 and 3 and they are just missing. This is a trilogy. These games belong together, and we are going into the 4th installment of Metroid Prime, and there's not an easy way to play the other games. So I really am hopeful that these comments mean something under the surface from the series producer of Prime 2, but I'm also just as much prepared for no rhyme or reason Nintendo to just skip up on Prime 2 and 3 altogether. And while Nash has gotten a lot right in terms of Nintendo Switch 2 information in this current generation, they are far from a perfect leaker, and I will say that some of the information they put out there kind of early does tend to change, and they have actually given an update recently to what their expectations are for the Metroid Prime 4 Direct, and they're now hearing conflicting things, but they still believe it will happen. Listen, if we got literally almost 2 hours of content in Kirby Air Riders 2 in the lead up to that game's release, and Nintendo's happy to do that, but they're not going to give Metroid Prime 4 Beyond at least some kind of 20-minute dedicated direct, that's ridiculous to me. And I really think it's a misstep for marketing a game that clearly has a massive budget with how many years it's been in development. It was scrapped back in 2019, restarted from the ground up, and it's been given all this time to make it to the finish line. How could Nintendo not fully promote this game? It would be a really big misstep, and I am hopeful that in true Nintendo fashion, sometimes at the 11th hour, literally like the month before the game comes out, they might want to get past Hyrule Warriors Age of Imprisonment, and we might start to really see them ramp up their communication around Prime 4. We covered a couple ads in a prior video that are definitely planned for holiday season ads advertising Metroid Prime 4's 4K 60 FPS and 1080p 120 FPS modes that are available for play in that game. Like, they definitely have some things around the corner that are just not happening yet, but I think we need to see a lot more of it, and a Prime 4 Focus Direct would make the most sense to me. And it's also very much the last opportunity and the last hope for Metroid Prime 2 and 3 Remastered to somehow reveal themselves and be available in the lead up to Prime 4's ultimate release. But let me know in the comments down below if you would pick up Prime 2 and 3 Remastered if they dropped. Do you think that we're going to get some kind of at least HD up-res type of port similar to Pikmin 1 and 2, but for Prime 2 and 3? Would you play the online multiplayer of Prime 2 and hop right into that if that's something that we do see supported and available? Do you think that Tanabe's comments around wanting to see people realize the full extent of the multiplayer mode of Prime 2 holds any weight to him knowing some kind of internal information that the game is being remade, or at least an HD port of it being done? Or is this just more of a wishful thinking scenario as we get closer to Prime 4's release date? So make sure you share all your thoughts and feelings in the comments down below before you leave, regardless if we agree or disagree. Also, make sure you like, subscribe, ring your notification bell. And with that, I've been Sunbro, you've been Nation. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.